The neon paint was still dripping from my mailbox when I realized my ex-wife had finally lost her mind. I stood there in my boxer shorts and an old Metallica t-shirt, coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips, staring at what used to be a respectable front yard. Garbage, actual, stinking garbage, was smeared across my porch like some deranged art installation. Eggshells, coffee grounds, what looked like a week's worth of rotting Chinese takeout, all of it spread with the kind of deliberate malice that takes real effort at 4 in the morning. Well, hell, I muttered, setting my mug down on the porch railing. That's just fantastic. My name's Jack Callahan, and I'm a 43-year-old handyman in a dying mill town in Maine. I fix toilets, repair decks, and occasionally wire up security systems for paranoid retirees who think the government's watching them through their microwaves. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Or it did, until my divorce lawyer took half my income for the next 5 years. The morning sun was just starting to peek over the old textile mill across the street, casting long shadows across my vandalized property. Mrs. Farley, my 70-something neighbor with a perm that hadn't changed since 1987, was already at her window, curtains pulled back just enough for her to get a good view of my humiliation. She opened her window, and I could hear the cackle before she even spoke. "Looks like you pissed off the wrong person, Jackie boy." "Good morning to you too, Mrs. Farley," I called back, forcing a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. "Don't suppose you saw who did this?" "I mind my own business," she said, which was the biggest lie I'd heard all week. Mrs. Farley knew everything that happened on Maple Street. She was like a human surveillance system, except she ran on gossip and daytime television instead of batteries. I sighed and went back inside to grab my phone. The camera. I'd installed a security camera just last month after someone, probably the same someone, had keyed my truck in the supermarket parking lot. Nothing fancy, just a basic wireless setup I'd picked up at the hardware store, but it had motion detection and night vision. I pulled up the app and scrolled back through the footage. There, 3:47 a.m. A figure in dark clothing and a ski mask, moving quickly but deliberately, spreading garbage with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for kindergarten finger painting. But it was the walk that caught my attention, that distinctive hip-swaying strut, the way the person kept checking their phone for light. I knew that walk. I'd watched it for 15 years of marriage. "Elise," I said to the empty room, "you vindictive, petty, absolutely predictable woman." My ex-wife had always been image-obsessed. Back when we were married, she'd spend 2 hours getting ready just to go to the grocery store. Now she was an HR manager at some tech startup in Portland, pulling in 6 figures while I was still charging $50 an hour to snake drains. The divorce had been her idea. She'd outgrown me, according to the papers her lawyer filed. What she meant was she'd found someone with a nicer car and a job title that didn't include the word handyman. That someone was Brandon Fitch, real estate agent extraordinaire, driver of a BMW 5 Series, and the kind of guy who wore cologne that smelled like it cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I'd seen him exactly twice, once at the divorce proceedings, where he'd sat in the back of the courtroom like some kind of moral support animal, and once at the Dead End, the local bar where I occasionally drowned my sorrows in cheap beer and cheaper company. The second time, he'd made the mistake of talking to me. "No hard feelings, right, buddy?" he'd said, all white teeth and spray tan. "Elise and I, we just clicked, you know? Sometimes these things happen." I'd smiled, nodded, and imagined 17 different ways to rearrange his face. Instead, I'd finished my beer and left. Because I'm civilized. Because I'm better than that. But standing there, looking at my garbage-covered porch, I realized something important. I was tired of being better than that. I grabbed my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. Mick's Dead End Bar and Grill, home of disappointment and day-old pretzels, came the gravelly voice on the other end. "It's Jack. You busy?" "It's 7 in the morning, Jack. I'm not even officially open. What's wrong?" Mick Patterson had been my best friend since our Army days, back when we were both young and stupid enough to think we were invincible. Now he owned the Dead End, served drinks to the same crowd of regulars every night, and occasionally let me crash on his couch when the loneliness got too heavy. "Elise vandalized my house," I said. "Got it on camera." There was a long pause. Then, "That crazy witch, what'd she do?" "Garbage, everywhere. Paint on the mailbox. The whole 9 yards. You call the cops?" I thought about that. Detective Harrow lived 3 houses down, and we'd exchanged nods at the neighborhood barbecue last summer. But calling the cops felt like admitting defeat, like saying I couldn't handle my own problems. Not yet, I said. I want to think about this. Jack. Mick's voice took on that warning tone I remembered from when he'd been my squad leader. Don't do anything stupid. Who, me? I grinned at my reflection in the hallway mirror. I'm just going to clean up my porch and go about my day like a responsible adult. Uh-huh. And I'm going to win the lottery and retire to Fiji. Look, come by the bar tonight. We'll talk strategy. Strategy for what? For whatever you're planning that you're not telling me about. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. Oui! He hung up before I could argue. Oui! I spent the next 3 hours cleaning garbage off my porch, scrubbing paint off my mailbox, and fielding questions from every nosy neighbor on the street. By the time I was done, my back hurt, my hands smelled like bleach, and I'd developed a detailed mental list of everything I wanted to say to Elise the next time I saw her. Oui, but I'm a patient man, and patience, I've learned, is the foundation of good revenge. Around noon, I drove over to Sid's house. Sid was the 17-year-old kid who lived 2 streets over, a computer genius who spent most of his time in his parents' basement building drones and hacking his school's grading system for fun. I'd hired him last month to help me set up my security camera, and he'd been practically vibrating with excitement at the chance to do something real. His mom answered the door, looking harried. Jack, good to see you. Sid, your friend is here. Thundering footsteps, and then Sid appeared, all gangly limbs and enthusiasm. Mr. Callahan, did the camera work? Did you catch something? Oui, sure did. Got a job for you, if you're interested. His eyes lit up. Paid? $50 and pizza. Oh, I'm in. What do you need? I showed him the footage on my phone. He watched it twice, his expression growing more serious. Ooh, that's messed up, Mr. Callahan. You know who it is? I've got a pretty good idea, but I need better coverage, more cameras, better angles. Think you can help me set that up? Can I? He was already heading for his room. I've got 3 more cameras we can use, and I can set up a motion-triggered alert system that'll send notifications straight to your phone. We can even add some IR illuminators for better night vision, and maybe some decoy cameras to make them think, Sid, English, please, he grinned. We're going to catch whoever did this so clearly, you could identify them in a police lineup from space. Perfect. When can you start? Give me an hour to grab my gear. I left him to his preparations and drove to the hardware store. Frank's Hardware had been a Maple Street institution for 40 years, run by Frank Sr. until his heart attack last winter, and now by Frank Jr., who'd inherited his father's business sense but none of his charm. Jack, Frank Jr. called from behind the counter. Heard about your porch. Mrs. Farley was in here this morning. Told everyone who'd listen. Of course she did. Just need some motion sensor lights and maybe some zip ties. Planning to catch the culprit? Planning to make sure it doesn't happen again. He rang me up, and I noticed the way he avoided eye contact. Small towns are like that. Everyone knows everyone's business, and my divorce had been the talk of Maple Street for months. Some people sided with me, the hard-working guy who got dumped for someone with better prospects. Others sided with Elise, the ambitious woman who refused to settle for less than she deserved. Most people just enjoyed the drama. By the time I got back home, Sid was waiting on my porch with a backpack full of equipment and the kind of manic energy only teenagers can sustain. Okay, Mr. Callahan, here's what I'm thinking. We put cameras here, here, and here, he pointed at various corners of my house, with overlapping fields of view so there are no blind spots. Then we set up the motion sensors to trigger not just recording, but also lights and an audible alert. If anyone comes within 20 feet of your property after dark, you'll know about it immediately. Sounds expensive. Sounds necessary. Plus, I'm doing you the friends and family rate. Your family rate is $50 and pizza. My regular rate is $200 and pizza. You're getting a steal. We spent the afternoon installing cameras, running cables, and programming the system. Sid did most of the technical work, while I provided the ladder and the muscle. By 5 o'clock, my house was wired up like a military installation. Test it, Sid said, handing me his phone with the monitoring app pulled up. I walked to the edge of my property. Immediately, lights blazed to life, and my phone buzzed with an alert. On Sid's screen, I could see myself in crystal clear high definition from 3 different angles. That'll do, I said, impressed despite myself. That'll do? Mr. Callahan, this is art. This is poetry. This is worth $50 and pizza. Come on, let's order. We sat on my porch, eating pepperoni and mushroom, while Sid explained the finer points of the system. Mrs. Farley watched from her window, probably wondering what we were up to. Let her wonder. At 7 o'clock, I sent Sid home with the leftover pizza and headed to the Dead End. The bar was exactly what you'd expect from a place called the Dead End. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and a jukebox that only played songs from before 1995. Mick was behind the bar, polishing glasses that probably hadn't been truly cleaned since the Clinton administration. Jack, right on time. Your usual? Make it a double. He poured me 2 fingers of whiskey and slid the glass across the bar. I took a sip, felt the burn, and let out a long breath. So, Mick said, leaning against the bar, what's the plan? Who says I have a plan? You've got that look. The same look you had back in Kandahar when you decided to rewire the captain's tent so his alarm clock would play Barbie Girl at 3 a.m. I couldn't help but grin at the memory. That was a good day. That was a court-martial waiting to happen. Lucky for you, the captain had a sense of humor. Mick's expression turned serious. Elise doesn't have a sense of humor, Jack. Neither does her boyfriend. You start messing with them, they're going to escalate. They already escalated. They trashed my house. So call the cops. Show them the footage. Let the system handle it. I shook my head. The system gave her half my money and called it fair. The system doesn't work for guys like me, Mick. You know that. He sighed, the sound of a man who'd had this argument before and knew he wasn't going to win. Fine. What do you need from me? Information. You hear things here. People talk. I need to know what Elise and Brandon are up to. You want me to spy on your ex-wife? I want you to listen. There's a difference. Mick studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll listen. But Jack, be careful. Revenge has a way of eating people alive. So does bitterness. At least revenge is active. I finished my drink and was about to order another when the door opened and Janine walked in. Janine Cooper, Elise's best friend since college, the kind of woman who smiled to your face and sharpened knives behind your back. She'd been at the divorce proceedings, sitting next to Elise, shooting me looks that could have curdled milk. She spotted me immediately, and her expression flickered. Surprise, then something like guilt, then the fake smile she probably practiced in the mirror. Jack! Wow, I haven't seen you in forever. Janine. I kept my voice neutral. How have you been? Oh, busy. Work is crazy. She ordered a white wine, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Listen, Jack, I heard about what happened to your house. That's awful. News travels fast. Small town. She took a sip of her wine, then looked at me directly. For what it's worth, I told Elise it was a bad idea. The bar went very quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to pause between songs. Excuse me? I said softly. Janine's eyes widened as she realized what she'd just admitted. I didn't mean, you told Elise it was a bad idea to trash my house, meaning you knew about it beforehand, meaning you were complicit. Jack, why? I leaned forward, and I saw her flinch. Why would she do that? What did I ever do to her except agree to the divorce she wanted? She's angry, Janine said quietly. You contested the alimony. You made her look bad in court. I contested paying her $600 a month when she makes 3 times what I do. That's not making her look bad. That's called basic fairness. She doesn't see it that way. Janine finished her wine in one gulp. Look, I shouldn't have said anything. Just be careful, okay? She's not done being angry. She left before I could respond, practically fleeing out the door. Mick whistled low. Well, that was illuminating. That was a gift, I said, pulling out my phone. Sid, you still up? Good. I need you to do something for me. 20 minutes later, I had a plan. It wasn't a good plan. It probably wasn't even a legal plan, but it was my plan, and after months of feeling helpless and humiliated, having any kind of plan felt like power. The next morning, I woke up to 17 motion alerts on my phone. I checked the footage, expecting to see Elise or Brandon creeping around my property. Instead, I saw cats, 17 different neighborhood cats, all triggering my expensive new security system. Fantastic, I muttered, making a note to adjust the sensitivity settings. But the 18th alert was different. This one showed a car, a very familiar BMW, driving slowly past my house at 2 in the morning. The driver's face was clearly visible in the infrared camera. Brandon Fitch, scoping out my property. Rookie mistake, Brandon. I said to the screen. Never scout in your own car. I saved the footage, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and sent a copy to Sid with instructions to keep it safe. Then I got dressed and went to work. I had 3 jobs that day: replacing a water heater, fixing a fence, and installing a ceiling fan. Normal, boring handyman work. But my mind was elsewhere, turning over possibilities, considering angles. The water heater job was for Mrs. Chen, a sweet elderly woman who'd lived in Maple Street longer than I'd been alive. She made me tea and asked about my divorce, with the kind of gentle concern that made me want to tell her everything. "That ex-wife of yours," she said, shaking her head. "She doesn't know what she gave up. You're a good man, Jack." "Thanks, Mrs. Chen. My husband, he was a handyman too. Worked with his hands his whole life. Died 20 years ago, and I still miss him every day." She patted my arm. "Don't let that woman make you bitter. Bitterness is poison." I thought about that while I worked. Bitterness is poison, but so is letting people walk all over you. By the time I finished my jobs, it was late afternoon. I drove past Elise's townhouse, one of those new developments on the edge of town, all identical facades and manicured lawns. Her Mercedes was in the driveway, and I could see lights on inside. I didn't stop. I just drove past, slow enough to look, fast enough not to be obvious. That night, I met Sid at a coffee shop downtown. He had his laptop out, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Okay, Mr. Callahan, I did what you asked. You're not going to believe what I found." He turned the screen toward me. Social media profiles, public records, photos. Brandon Fitch's entire digital life, laid out like a map. "He's married," Sid said, pointing at a Facebook photo from 3 years ago. Or at least, he was. Wife's name is Stephanie, lives in New Hampshire. They never officially divorced. I checked the public records. I stared at the photo. Brandon and a blonde woman, smiling on a beach somewhere tropical. He's married? Technically, and get this, he's got a second mortgage on a property in Portsmouth that he never disclosed. I found the paperwork through the county assessor's office. Public record. Does Elise know? Based on her social media? No way. She's posting all this stuff about finally finding her soulmate and new beginnings. She has no idea she's the other woman. I leaned back in my chair, mind racing. This was better than I'd hoped. This was ammunition. "Sid, you're a genius." "I know. That'll be another $50. I just paid you yesterday." "That was for the cameras. This is for the investigation. I'm running a business here, Mr. Callahan." I paid him because he'd earned it, and because I had a feeling I'd need his help again soon. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. My new security system caught nothing but cats and the occasional raccoon. Elise's social media showed her living her best life. Photos of expensive dinners, weekend trips, inspirational quotes about leaving toxic people behind. I worked, came home, watched my cameras, and planned. Then, on Friday night, everything changed. I was at the dead end, nursing a beer and watching a baseball game on the TV above the bar, when Brandon walked in. He didn't see me at first. He was with a group of guys, all of them wearing the kind of business casual that screamed, "I sell things for a living." They took a table near the back, ordered a round of drinks, and proceeded to get loud. I kept my head down and listened. "Telling you, she's loaded," Brandon was saying. "Works in tech, pulls in 6 figures easy, and she's so desperate for validation, she'll believe anything." His friends laughed. My grip tightened on my beer bottle. "What about the husband?" one of them asked. "Ex-husband, total loser, handyman, drives a beat-up truck, lives in the same dump he's had for 20 years. She's embarrassed she ever married him." More laughter. Mick caught my eye from behind the bar, shook his head slightly, a warning. I ignored it. "The best part," Brandon continued, "is she thinks I'm going to marry her. Like I'd actually tie myself down to someone that desperate. I'm just riding this out until something better comes along." That's when I stood up and walked over to their table. "Brandon," I said pleasantly. "Funny running into you here." He looked up, and I watched the color drain from his face. "Jack, hey, I didn't see you." "Yeah, I noticed. You were too busy talking about my ex-wife. Sorry, your girlfriend." Easy to get confused. His friends had gone quiet, sensing trouble. "Look, man, I was just what? Just telling your buddies how you're using her? How she's desperate and you're planning to dump her when someone better comes along?" Brandon stood up, trying to reclaim some authority. He was taller than me, but I'd spent 20 years doing physical labor. I wasn't worried. "You need to leave," he said. "This is a public bar. I have as much right to be here as you do." I smiled. But hey, while I've got you here, I wanted to ask you something. How's Stephanie? His expression froze. What? Stephanie, your wife, in New Hampshire. Does she know you're dating someone in Maine, or is that a surprise you're saving for later? One of his friends muttered. Holy hell. Brandon's face went from pale to red. That's none of your business. It's Elise's business, though. Don't you think she deserves to know she's dating a married man? We're separated. Separated isn't divorced, and you never told her, did you? I pulled out my phone, showed him the photo Sid had found. That's you and Stephanie, 3 months ago. Doesn't look very separated to me. He grabbed for my phone. I pulled it back, and suddenly Mick was there, one massive hand on Brandon's shoulder. Gentlemen, Mick said calmly, we don't grab in my bar. Brandon, I think you and your friends should settle your tab and leave. He's harassing me. He's standing here talking. You're the one getting physical. Now, are you going to leave on your own, or do I need to help you? Brandon looked at Mick, then at me, then at his friends, who were already standing up and reaching for their wallets. Smart guys. This isn't over, Brandon said. I certainly hope not, I replied. We're just getting started. They left, and the bar erupted in conversation. Mick poured me a fresh beer. That was stupid, he said. That was necessary. You just made an enemy, Jack. I already had an enemy. Now he knows I'm not going to roll over. I went home that night, feeling better than I had in months. The look on Brandon's face when I'd mentioned Stephanie, that was worth whatever came next. What came next was a brick through my living room window at 3 a.m. The security system woke me up, lights blazing, phone screaming alerts. I grabbed the baseball bat I'd started keeping by my bed and ran downstairs. The window was shattered, glass everywhere, and in the middle of my living room floor was a brick with a note wrapped around it. Mind your own business, or next time it's your face. Subtle. I checked the camera footage. Same figure in dark clothes and a ski mask. But this time I could see the car they'd arrived in. A Honda Civic, not Brandon's BMW. Smart. He'd learned from his last mistake. But not smart enough. The license plate was clearly visible. I called Detective Harrow at 6 a.m., because if I was going to be awake, so was he. Jack, what's wrong? Someone threw a brick through my window. Got it on camera. Need to file a report. He was at my house 20 minutes later, still in his pajamas under a police windbreaker, looking at the brick and the footage on my phone. That's vandalism and threatening behavior, he said. I can bring them in for questioning if you can identify them. Can't see their face, but I can see their license plate. He squinted at the screen. I'll run it. Probably won't lead anywhere. Car's likely stolen or borrowed, but I'll check. Thanks, Harrow. He looked at me seriously. Jack, what's going on? This is the second incident in a week. My ex-wife doesn't like me very much. Your ex-wife did this? My ex-wife's boyfriend. Probably. Maybe. I can't prove it. But you have suspicions. I have a lot of things. Suspicions, evidence, and a really strong desire to make them regret ever messing with me. Harrow sighed. Don't do anything illegal, Jack. Let me handle this. Of course, I'm a law-abiding citizen. He didn't look convinced, but he took my statement, photographed the damage, and promised to follow up. After he left, I called my insurance company, then Sid. Mr. Callahan, it's 6:30 in the morning. Someone threw a brick through my window. I need you to trace a license plate. That's illegal. So is throwing bricks through windows. You in or out? A pause. Then, send me the plate number. By noon, I had my answer. The car belonged to a rental company in Portland. Sid had hacked into their system, don't ask me how, and found that the car had been rented by Brandon Fitch 2 days ago. Got him, I said, looking at the rental agreement on Sid's screen. Got him doing what? Renting a car? That's not illegal. No, but throwing a brick through someone's window is. And now I can prove he was driving the car that was at my house. Can you, though? The footage doesn't show the driver's face. He had a point. The evidence was suggestive, not conclusive. A good lawyer could argue that anyone could have borrowed Brandon's rental car. I needed more. That night, I set a trap. I left a cardboard box on my porch, clearly labeled Divorce Files, Evidence. It was empty except for some old phone books I'd weighted it with, but from a distance, it looked important. Then I waited. The attack came at 2 a.m. Brandon. I was sure it was him, even with the ski mask, crept onto my porch, grabbed the box, and ran back to the rental car parked down the street. Every second was captured in glorious high definition from 3 different angles, but I wasn't done. While he was distracted with the box, Sid, who'd been hiding in my garage, attached a GPS tracker to the underside of the rental car. "Got it," Sid whispered into his phone. "He's leaving now." We watched on Sid's laptop as the GPS signal moved through town, heading toward Elise's townhouse. "Bingo," I said. The next morning, I sent an anonymous email to Elise. No message, just 3 attachments: the photo of Brandon and Stephanie from 3 months ago, a copy of their marriage certificate from public records, and a screenshot of the rental agreement for the car that had been at my house the night of the brick incident. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks. They didn't disappoint. By noon, Elise's social media had gone dark. By evening, Janine was posting cryptic messages about lying men and betrayal. By the next morning, Brandon's car was no longer parked at Elise's townhouse. I allowed myself a small smile. But I wasn't done, not even close. The annual Lobster Fest was that weekend, a town tradition where everyone gathered at the Riverside Park to eat overpriced seafood and pretend to enjoy community togetherness. Normally, I avoided it, but this year I had a reason to attend. Janine would be there. And Janine, I'd learned, had a habit of showing people things on her phone when she'd had too much to drink. I found her near the beer tent, already on her 3rd wine cooler, laughing with a group of women I vaguely recognized from around town. "Janine," I said, approaching with my most charming smile. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She looked at me warily. "Jack, I don't think that's a good idea. Please, just 5 minutes. I want to apologize." That got her attention. "Apologize? For putting you in the middle of this thing with Elise. It wasn't fair." She softened slightly. "Oh, well, I appreciate that. Can I buy you a drink, as an apology?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. Why not?" We walked to the beer tent together, and I bought her another wine cooler. We made small talk, weather, work, mutual acquaintances. I was patient. I was charming. I was everything she expected from someone trying to make amends. And then, casually, I said, "So I heard about Elise and Brandon. That must have been rough for her, finding out he was married." Janine's eyes widened. "How did you? Small town. People talk." I leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, I'm not surprised. Guy always seemed like a sleaze." "He is. God, Jack, you should have seen her when she found out. She was devastated. And the worst part is, he'd been using her. He told his friends she was desperate, that he was just with her for the money." "No way." "Yes. I heard the recording." My heart jumped. "Recording?" "She recorded their last fight. He admitted everything. The wife, the lying, all of it. She played it for me yesterday." Janine pulled out her phone. "Want to hear it?" "Absolutely." She pulled up a voice memo and hit play. Brandon's voice came through clearly, angry and defensive. "So what if I didn't tell you about Stephanie? We're separated. And yeah, I said some things to my friends. That's just guy talk, Elise. Don't be so sensitive." "You said I was desperate." Elise's voice, shrill and hurt. "You said you were using me. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything." The recording went on for another 2 minutes, Brandon digging himself deeper with every word. It was beautiful. "Wow," I said when it finished. "That's brutal. Right? Men are such pigs." Janine took another sip of her drink. "Elise is done with him. She kicked him out, blocked his number, everything. Good for her." We talked for a few more minutes, then I excused myself, but not before I'd used a small app on my phone, courtesy of Sid, to copy the recording from Janine's phone via Bluetooth. By that evening, the recording was uploaded to a burner email account, and by the next morning, it had been anonymously sent to Brandon's boss, his wife Stephanie, and 3 of his biggest clients. I didn't feel guilty. I felt efficient. The fallout was spectacular. Brandon's real estate office issued a statement about parting ways with him. Stephanie filed for divorce and a restraining order. His clients dropped him. Within a week, Brandon Fitch went from successful real estate agent to unemployed pariah. But Elise was a different problem. She might have been done with Brandon, but she wasn't done being angry, and she'd figured out that I was behind the anonymous emails. I knew this because she showed up at my house on a Tuesday afternoon, pounding on my door hard enough to rattle the frame. "Jack, open this door right now." I considered ignoring her, but that would only make things worse. I opened the door and found her standing on my porch, face red, eyes blazing. "Hello, Elise. You bastard. You ruined my life. I ruined your life? That's rich, coming from the woman who threw garbage on my porch and had her boyfriend throw a brick through my window. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just like you don't know anything about the vandalism, the threats, or the fact that Brandon was using you for your money. She flinched at that. You had no right to interfere. You had no right to vandalize my property. But here we are. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to take everything you have left. For what? Sending you publicly available information about your boyfriend's marriage. Good luck with that. She stepped closer, and for a moment I thought she might actually hit me. Instead, she spat in my face. I stood there, feeling the saliva drip down my cheek, and smiled. That's assault, Elise, in front of my security cameras. You want to add that to your list of bad decisions? She looked up, saw the cameras, and her face went even redder. I hate you, she said. I know, but I don't care anymore. That's the difference between us. You're still trying to hurt me, and I'm just trying to live my life. I wiped my face with my sleeve and closed the door. Through the window, I watched her stand there for a long moment before finally getting in her Mercedes and driving away. That should have been